Hello everyone, my name is Tsoukaladelis and I'll be presenting our paper, The Times, They Are Changing, Characterizing Post-Publication Changes to Online News. So first I'll start with a brief historical overview. In about 1440, the Gutenberg press is invented. 5.5 centuries after that, there are 60 million newspapers in circulation every day in the US. 30 years after that, the vast majority of Americans get their news online. Now this is actually a positive trend. You have more portability, you can get instant updates and notifications on stories you may follow. There is better ease of access both to different viewpoints as well as to news from different geographical locations. You have more accessibility for people that may have disabilities, and you have a combination of different media formats, such as text and video, for instance. Finally, the overall cost for the consumer is lower. On the flip side, we also notice some worrying trends that start to develop. For instance, readers will usually only glance at the title of an article. As a matter of fact, the average minutes spent by readers per visit has gone down to about a minute and a half from 2.5 minutes back in 2014. Social media is now used to disseminate new articles, which means that news publishers are now encouraged to make their article titles a bit more clickbaity, and news publishers can also perform stealth edits now, which is what we call post-publication edits that they do not alert the readers of. So what does happen when an article changes? Take for instance our New York Times example here. Someone that may read the leftmost version, which is the original one, and someone that reads the rightmost version, which is the latest one, would have completely different viewpoints as to what actually happened in this event. And this leads us to what we call split worldviews. Now, first of all, the fact that news publishers alter the title and content of their articles post-publication is not new. This was argued in this paper here. And we argue that these changes create a split worldview. A worldview of people that read the article before it was changed and one for the people that read it after it was changed. These changes lead to the statistic of half of Americans believing that national news organizations intend to mislead, misinform, or otherwise persuade the public. So we can see how they feed into a general theme of misinformation and lack of trust in the news. Now, the security community has long considered black hat SEO, cloaking, residual trust in domain names to be traditional integrity issues. In this case, we argue that we have a content integrity issue, and it does not just affect news articles, but user-generated content in general, such as social media posts, for instance. Although we will focus on news articles for this presentation. The only way to currently mitigate this is through third-party archiving services, such as the Wayback Machine, but that's a single point of failure and they also have their own drawbacks. For instance, they may be hindered by paywalls. Now, our motivation was actually this article here, in which we noticed that I believe the title of this article also changed, but the content of the article itself changed, and it changed significantly. The left side here is the original version, which was highly critical of Elon Musk and making some points about his upbringing in South Africa, and was later edited to have a more neutral point of view. Now, we can see by these changes that minute details can shape the view of readers, and they mostly go unnoticed because someone that reads an article now and may even reread it a month later, assuming that happens, they would not remember the original thing they read. You might ask, can we rely on news publishers to report on these changes? And in this case, there was a correction added to the article on May the 5th, 2022. However, the correction is referring to different changes that were made on the article, and the ones highlighted above were not mentioned. Now, let me give you a very high-level overview of our experiment. First, we collected articles from various publishers. We crawled them upon publication, and then again later, and we compared them for post-publication changes. So we didn't want to add our own bias to this experiment, so we selected publishers of varying popularity by using the Trunk rank, and varying political leaning by using all sides' media bias chart. You can see here on the right this distribution, and we tried to balance it out for all sides. We collected more than 600,000 articles which we crawled twice, once immediately upon publication and once again months later. We parsed each article's HTML data for content and then removed content that we thought would dynamically change over time, such as ads, related news, and only kept the content of the article itself. Lastly, we split up our analysis in syntactic and semantic changes. Syntactic changes in this case kind of tells us the high-level view of what changed in the article, how many paragraphs were removed or added, where the changes happened, while semantic changes tells us in more detail how the article has changed. So did the sentiment change, did the meaning change, that sort of thing. Let's first look at our syntactic analysis results. We first note that post-publication edits are quite common, with about 28% of articles exhibiting some type of them. We use edit distance or Levenstein distance to measure syntactic changes in this case. And looking at the graph on the right, if we take, for instance, OAN, you can see that about 15% of its articles has changed, which comparatively is not that much, but looking at the median edit distance, it's about 25%, which means that when changes do happen, they are quite large, again, comparatively. On the flip side, if we look at the New York Times, you can see that about 40% of their articles have changed in some capacity, but the edit distance, the median edit distance, is much lower, closer to 5%. We also track statistics such as removed and added paragraphs, the topology of changes, so where the changes happen in the article, for instance, closer to the top, closer to the bottom, somewhere in the middle, as well as the length of changes in word levels. Now, on our semantic analysis, as mentioned, the 165,000 articles exhibit some type of post-publication edit, and that's hundreds of thousands of article paragraphs that have changed. Article paragraphs are the preferred metric that we use to for the semantic analysis. So it was quite impossible for us to manually go one by one and see, okay, the sentiment on this one has changed, the meaning on that has changed, etc. So we had to employ NLP models to analyze them semantically. We used OpenAI's GPT-3 to analyze the entailment. So in this case, if a paragraph has changed, is the meaning the same or has the meaning also changed? And Roberta-based model to analyze the sentiment of the original paragraph and the post-edit paragraph and see if that has changed or not. We focused on this sentiment entailment for our semantic analysis, and we also manually sampled the results by these models to kind of gauge their accuracy. By utilizing the Roberta-based model, we can see that about 7% of changed paragraphs also have their sentiment altered, which you can see on the table on the left. While for entailment analysis, we can see that 22% of the changed paragraphs don't follow from the original paragraph, so the meaning has also changed. And you can see this on the table on the right. Now, here are some examples of sentiment analysis. So, a more negative example would be the first one, which is a direct quote. First of all, that's really the MO of this administration, quote unquote, said the Representative so-and-so while serving as a Thursday guest on the American Agenda show. This paragraph was later edited to include, he added that the Biden administration is certainly behind the curve on many things, not putting Americans first. Now, obviously, the addition here paints the overall paragraph in a more negative light. On a more neutral example, you have, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky addressing Congress Wednesday morning, receiving a warm welcome from both sides of the aisle, as he called on the United States to do more. The receiving a warm welcome part was then dropped to add invoking the September 11 attacks and Pearl Harbor, which of course kind of dims the sentiment in this case. Lastly, we also track stealth edits. Now, before we talk about stealth edits, let's talk a bit about our terminology used. So we have what we call proper updates. Proper updates are corrections, editor's notes, those sorts of things where the news publishers themselves will explain what changes they made to an article, why they made them ideally, and inform the reader of them. Then we have technical updates. Technical updates can look something like the one on the right here, top right, in which you have a timestamp on the original article, and when that article has been changed, you see a flag somewhere or a notification that says last modified on that date. The changes themselves are not mentioned in the article, nor any reason, of course, for these changes, but the article does technically notify you that it has been edited at some point. Finally, you may have no updates whatsoever. And we do note that 60% of changed articles do not note any type of update, as you can see on our table here on the right. Lastly, policies differ wildly per publisher. Each publisher may technically report on all the changes they make, but not really ever report what we call proper updates on changed articles. On the other hand, others may never do technical type of updates. It may not even be part of what we assume to be their framework for writing articles, but they may sometimes report proper updates. And sometimes in the case of the BBC, we weren't able to find either technical or proper updates. Now, it's important, first of all, as you notice, for publishers to standardize kind of the way they inform readers of updates. But we don't really have to stop there, because user-generated content faces the same pitfalls. Online content changes constantly, and the only way to currently preserve integrity there is again through archiving services. So we argue that we need a new standard that informs users that their website's content has changed. For similar content, you can also look at our paper from SecWeb 2024, Manufactured Narratives on the Potential of Manipulating Social Media to Politicize World Events. To conclude, we collected and studied over 600,000 articles for post-publication changes and discovered that 28% of them exhibit some type of post-publication change. 22% of the changed paragraphs don't follow from the original, so their meaning has changed during these edits. 7% of changed paragraphs also have their sentiment altered, and 60% of changes are completely unannounced. We also find many more statistics which you can look at our paper for, and we would like to leave you with this. Content integrity is not really limited in news articles. We believe it is a new research direction that falls under the integrity umbrella that is fast evolving, and especially as misinformation and disinformation become more and more prevalent, this will become more and more important as well. Thank you.